Welcome back to the Hobby Room, and this will be the final video on the Airfix Handley page, HP42 Heracles. Yes, and the reason is, it's done. Yes, look at that. There she is, all fully painted, deckled, rigged, everything. It's all done. It all works, it flies, it runs around the room. No, it doesn't. Heracles is done. Would you like to see how I did all the scratch additions and how I finally did some 3D printing and got some rigging done? Yes, you would. Great. Roll the music. Well, if you've been watching the last video, this is where I left things. I had fully masked up all the windows, and I showed my special method for doing that. That is really quite easy. I know there are heaps of suggestions for other ways, but that's the way I like to do it. It's really fast and easy for me. Now, I also started talking about the scratch additions, and in this video I'm actually going to go ahead much further with that, and I'm going to show you how I made like that tiny little thing there, and the whole back end here, which is full of little scratch changes. I'll show you each one, how I put them together, and how easy it was. One of the easiest scratch additions is just adding this little bit of brass here, which is the supports for the mudguard above the wheel. And although things aren't quite exactly to scale the Airfix kit, you can kind of make an approximation and you can get one to fit. So I just measured that up, made that a little bit larger than I needed to, bent it round a drill bit, which was the diameter of the hub, and then I just glued it on, trimmed it to fit. Now, my wheels are only dry fit, so I can take that part off. Not only that, I've only just tacked this in place with CA glue. It isn't like fully set, because I think I'll adjust it a bit up more on the hub, so that will actually shear off. In fact, tiniest bump, and it's come off. Now, that's a little trick you can use. CA glue can be a way to temporarily affix things to see if they get a fit, as long as you don't use too much. And then when you want to separate it, you just bang it at 90 degrees, at tangent to the glue. So, you know, if the glue is straight up and down, you tap it on the side and the CA glue snaps, which is usually the big problem with CA glue. You go and glue something and that's great, and then you bump it and it snaps off. Well, here we can turn that to our advantage. But when it comes to other things, the flagpole, yep, I have already cut that to size, and I've dipped the end in some white glue. It's a little trick I did on the Sunderland to make gear lever knobs. So that will sit in there very nicely, and that will make the little flagpole, right? Which is a hell of a lot better than the horrible big fat plastic thing that came with the kit. Now I want to turn my attention to working at the rear here, and there's the little handle that goes over here. Now, as far as I can tell from the photos, have a look, it sort of angles down at the front and comes back. It has like a little beak, but it goes into a point pretty well on the stabilizer. So it's going to be fairly easy because I've actually got a nice little mark here, a rib actually on the wing. So I know that is the point there that I'm going to need my bit of wire to go in. So I'm just going to actually drill a little hole there. Here I won't need to, I'm just going to tuck that around and over. So the matter then of sort of measuring things, so what I need to know is that distance there. All right, so it's from there to there. So that's 7.8, okay. Now, it then bends forward, so I'll make that 8 millimeters, it'll bend forward. How high up is it? Not much. I mean, if you have a look at the photos, it's not much at all. A lot of people have made it really tall, but I'd say it only sits up about 2 millimeters. So yeah, so I'll need, say, 3 millimeters long so I can poke in the hole, 8 millimeters long, and then a bit of a V thing, which I can leave kind of open-ended, because then I can trim it to fit at the end. So after measuring and a little bit of trial and error, I mean, I made it bigger than I needed, so I kept trimming it back, and that's kind of how you do this sort of thing. There she is. So let's a little test dry fit. And there we have it. She'll just require gluing into place. She drops down a bit at the front at the moment, but she will glue nicely into there. So let's do that. I'll just glue that in, and then we'll move on to the next thing. That little piece now glued into place. I have no idea what it does. It may be just some part of the bracing, because there does appear to be sort of a rigging line that comes down from there. But I'm not going to worry too much about all the fine rigging. In fact, I'm going to drop about half the rigging because it's just too much all bracing. This is just too much mucking around. There are a pair of these that go both either side, but they also go at the front and the back. I'm only going to do one. So there are other ones that go from the middle of the fin, middle fin, and up. But again, there's a pair of them, but it's just too much work. I'm going to do one of each, and that will give the effect. To all intents and purposes, when you look at it, it'll look pretty well the same, because usually they'll be hidden behind each other. So let's get on with that. Putting in these little bits of wire, there's a lot of trial and error, and the trick is you can measure it, and I did measure it was about 18, and then I found I had to cut a little bit off that. So I do the best I can to cut a piece the right size. So I'm hoping I've made a little mark on the rod there. That's 18, which is what it measured to, but I know it's probably going to be too long. I've got some grooves in here. This is supposed to sit exactly on the rudder groove, or probably just inside it. So I can actually run it inside those grooves. And I can see that's way off, so I want to get it up to there. So it's just trial and error, and you take a bit off, and then eventually you've taken too much off and you have to start all over again. Okay, that's the one. That will fit. So now we need a little bit of glue in there, and a tiny dab of glue. It's friction fit. That's the thing, if you get it to point, it's friction fit. Life is easy because it's going to hold in place. And then you really only got to get a little bit of glue in there to make sure it doesn't pop out. Sure, you could drill holes and you can try and rig lines, and that works as well. But with a bit of patience, this is doable, and they are quite thick, these ones, as far as I can tell. They were sort of more like rods. So that will do the job. Let's move on to something a little easier and a bit more fun. At the tail here, there are some little trims that need to go in. And they just sit there like that. But they're just sitting in mid-air, really. They're only joined at the bottom. There's no actual join up here at the top. And if you have a look at the reference drawings, there's photos. They are little triangles. So I'm going to work out how big a triangle, but rather than try and make it out of brass, which tends to be, say hit and miss and too much trouble, I'm going to make it out of a 0.5. It actually measures to 0.4 millimeter plastic rod, and that way my triangle should be exact, and I can glue it to a stabilizer and then just pop the whole thing in. Job done. Well, I've done this side. It's in. The stabilizer's nice and straight up and down, and there's that little triangular bracket. It's a tiny thing, but without it, the thing's just sitting in the air. I didn't like that. So I've created another little one here. All I've done is cut those just over 2 millimeters long each, and then popped them in there to form an equilateral triangle. And they sort of set, the forward one sits just in front of the foldy line for the flappy thing. Oh, technical terms, I know. The groove there, the groove which is part of that rudder. So now it should be just a matter of popping this guy in like I did on the other side. It should fit perfectly. Yeah, it's easier said than done. Every time I try to do something on camera, it's an almighty kerfuffle. So, glue to the part. Often I'll glue to a slot so the part doesn't drag glue all over everything, but in this case, I know I'm going to have to do it this way. So the slot is pretty easy to get into. You just got to make sure you got your vein around the right way. And the beauty here is we can use gravity to make things work. That will fall onto the triangle, so I can let that sort of set, and then I can put a dab of glue on there. I don't really need it, because that glue in there is going to be sufficient. That cement I'm using is the Revel stuff. It's going to just glue that like baby shit to a blanket. So all I've got to do is hold this for a while. What I want to check is it straight up and down this way? No, it needs a little bit of adjustment. So there we go. As it's straight up down that way, that's fine. Alright, well I'll let that set, and then I can add just a touch of glue there on the triangle, and that one's done. Well, I have the last few things here just drying because I needed to get a vertical for a tiny piece down here. I'll show that one first. So take this off my little rudimentary jig. I always do this. I use things that are lying around the holly room to make up jigs. So you may see there's that poking out thing, and actually it's quite simple. It's a U-shaped piece of brass which I just bent. It's 5mm long on one arm, and I just bent it round a drill bit to get the shape. Then I drilled a couple of little holes in the fuselage here, and that gave me mounting points for the bottom of that. Easy enough then to poke that in and glue that U shape in place. Once I've done that, I drilled a hole at the back here in the middle, which is for this styrene supporting beam there, and just glued that in with normal Revel contactor and let it just flop down. I had it quite long because I didn't know exactly the length I needed. And then once that had set in place and it was sitting there nicely on the U-shaped horse ring, I dabbed some sour glue in, and when that set, then I got in with the nippers, cut that to shape. That gave me the triangular bracket. So that's how I got that whole triangular bracket thing happening. This little poking out thing, I tried a few different things because in the photos it looks like two things, almost looks like two barrels of a gun, but I could not get that happening. I had nothing small enough to make that sort of achievable at all. So instead I just put in one little piece of brass, and then to make sure that it would ended up being at the right angle is why I put it in the jig and I let the whole thing sit perpendicular, so that hopefully it's dried and it won't go Mr. Floppy. No. So now that sticks out like it should. So that is it, and as far as I can tell that's pretty well to scale, because I've realised the height of those little jigs, right, the little triangular sort of thing there, that is the same height as the windows. So with this back wheel, the part's not too bad. So the vertical sort of line of grey plastic, that's the part, and it has a little piece that nicks in the back of the fuselage. I looked at so many photos, it's really hard to tell what's going on, but there does seem to be these little braces that go across here horizontally. So I made two of those, and again I drilled some locating holes and then worked out a length that I needed and made two exactly the same, put them in the locating holes and away they go. That would seem a bit high in that locating hole. Oh well, it'll be fine. It'll all come out the wash, put a tiny bit of putty in on that. I haven't had to use much putty in this build at all, but that achieves that and gets that sort of look. That's the sort of look it should have. It's not exactly accurate. There are more braces that should go under here. I don't know if I can be bothered doing those. What I really want to do now is I want to start painting this. And there you go. It's all painted. Well, it's all painted metallic Stynylrez, which is a really nice colour and a base. I might do some dry brushing of silver on it, but I kind of like it just the way it is, so we'll see how we go. What I need to do now is I've got tyres to black here. I decided I'd prime everything in the Stynylrez metal because then I can just paint the tyres around there. That's easy enough. And the motors actually have quite a lot of metal on them. So, not that you can sort of see. They have quite a lot of metal on them. And then it's really only bits and pieces, like the cylinder heads are actually black. So, I decided just as easy to paint those metal. And the same with the props. The centre of the props is metal, but of course they are probably wood. I imagine they are wood. Or maybe they were metal props then, don't know. But anyhow, the props are brown in all the examples I've seen. So I'm thinking they're wood. All right, let's get on with the super detailing. So I'm going to do the motors, but there's a lot of silver on them. There's a lot of, metal colour. See the pick? So really, I only need to do the cylinder cooling fins. Right, you can't really see them. And the gaps between. And then all I'm going to do is drop it in the middle. Doesn't matter if I splash the top of the engine, the motor, the cylinder top. It won't matter too much if I splash that cylinder top because A, it'll probably drain away, but B, we can come over with a dry brush later on and touch that up. So that's all of those done. Now I've got to do the gaps between. Again, I could have really just splashed this everywhere, I suppose. Now for the wheels, the reason I painted more silver is it's now pretty easy actually to run your brush around because you've got a nice little rim there. So I'm going to use this, it's anthracite. Alright, it's a darker sort of grey that I've got. So German grey will work. This is just a little bit darker. I rarely do tyres black because tyres actually in scale never really are black. It's an illusion. Whereas you paint them with this. Now, if I actually hold this still and let the brush run around, probably going the wrong way, because the brush really should stroke that way, shouldn't it? And I've made a bit of a gaff of it. It's harder to do on camera, but usually that will follow the line. So you can usually do that sort of trick where you just go around. I haven't done as good a job as normal. But beauty is I can also come back and I can touch up that little ridge. A bit of dry brushing, but otherwise it's not too bad. And similarly on the back here, I can do the same trick, but I'll rotate the correct way. You want to rotate into the brush, as I did, that's what gaffed it up. But if I place my brush on there, position I want, and then rotate, because my hands are just not that steady, I'm going to do this sort of trick. There you go, just about done. That's not bad. Go again. Really need quite a twist up. So in theory, you're painting the right bit. That'll hurt. But you can see it, if your hands are steady than mine, you probably do a much better job. And then here again, just lower the brush and rotate. You get a much smoother effect. And there we go. We have one wheel. I might go back and touch that up a little bit. But to all intents and purposes, it's not bad. Oh, it started to come away there. Probably need a second coat and it can be all fixed up then, but it's not too bad. And there we have it. Hercules is all assembled and all the detail painting is done. Hardest thing with these bloody exhausts here, I put a little rod under there to try and space them because they've got to sit proud of the wings. Ideally they should have some tiny little brackets on them, but who's got time for that? I mean, I've done so much on this kit already, it didn't really matter. And my masking, I'm really impressed with how the masking came out. It nice and sharp. The only problem I had with the masking wasn't actual masking of the lines. It was when I peeled it all off, my fingernail scratched across that back piece there, and I had to touch that up. So that's the only touch up. Apart from that, that's pretty well how she came out. Maybe it would have been a better idea to have puttied in and glued in that canopy, but what the heck, it doesn't matter. Really happy with those motors. And as you can see, they only needed that cylinder heads, really, the fins, darkening, because all the rest needs to pop out. And it does. It all pops out very nicely. It's sort of subtle there. I mean, if you don't know what I've done, you just look at it and go, yeah, they're motors. It's great. So I'm very happy with that. That turned out well. And I put the little bracings on there. I painted those silver. So that was all done. I mean, she came together so easily. She really did. It's a lovely little kit. And now it's all painted up in one colour. You can really see what's going on. Look at the windows there. You can still see those little seats inside. So that is good. So really all that's left to do now is the decals. And if I've got time, a little bit of rigging. So let's get on with that. Now this is the size rod that I've been using in brass and in plastic, right? It's only 0.5mm, right? But rigging is thinner. So how about those? That is a lot thinner, isn't it? Those 3D printed. It just took me half an hour to measure up and then get them printed. I put big strong frames on because it's the only way to do it. This is sort of the trick I've been doing with the sailing ships. So I thought, I wonder if it works for aircraft. Well, so far they've printed okay. Let's see how they go on. Bingo bongo, Hercules is done. There you go. What do you think of that? That 3D rigging turned out really nice. The decals were a challenge, to say the least. They sort of don't look too bad here, but look, I am getting discoloration on the wings. I think it's the Future. I used Future. Put it down. Anyhow, oh, you can see it there. I don't know if you can. Oh, it's great. Doesn't show up on camera. Nothing happened. Nothing to see here. So a little word Heracles on there. That's good. I'm really happy with the engines on this. That's kind of my favourite thing. It really is. Underneath, well, we had a lot of dramas. I didn't have a decal that didn't fold or didn't break or didn't have some sort of drama. So as you can see, the E on Imperial looks a little bit umlauty or something. They're all on there. Now, there is something that I did wrong, and you'll have to figure it out for yourself. Oh, there's one of my little 3D printed struts. They turned out so well. Really easy to put in. Double CA glue, tab it in place, bingo bongo, she's done. She's good, she's done. Heracles is now finished. And some of the things I'm really proud of, the masking, the motors, fixing a few little things around the place, the struts I put in with wire, but the 3D struts, oh, I'm going to talk more about those another day, because they were really easy to put in. I tell you, it was just a matter of print them out, pop them in, CA glue, done. Easiest rigging I've done in my life. So there you are. All right, well, that's it. That's all I've got to say. There'll be a few little pictures on the tail out of this so you can enjoy the Heracles from a few different angles. And see if you can spot the mistake. There is an error in my decaling. Yeah, didn't notice it, so it was far too late. Anyhow, buttons, 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 buttons. You know those bloody buttons. You've got to do these buttons, right? These buttons here. Yeah, apparently it's your job. Not me, you. Get the bloody buttons done. And if you can, buy me a curry. That's another button you can hit. I really need a curry after all those decals. I tell you, they're a pain. Okay, that's it. It's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harry Houdini.